YouTube. It is 60 degrees, 7:40 in the morning, and it's ugly outside. Like, just fog. We definitely live in Seattle or maybe London. I'm not sure. But it's foggy. It's a foggy morning, but you know what? That's okay. It is what it is. We're headed to work, and then we're going to take the tour of Space Center Houston. It's going to be a good day. Next Friday, we will either go see the Independence Plaza at Space Center Houston or go to the car show, and Saturday we'll do whichever one we didn't do on Friday. So, that's the plan. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day at work. I'll see you soon at Space Center Houston. As I told you, here we are back at NASA, looking at one of the spacesuits from the shuttle era. It was used. Wow, that's what it looked like a long time ago. So this was used in the 1966 TV show. Pretty cool, actually. Alright, this is Deke Slayton's Apollo-Soyuz pressure suit. This was his backup suit. This one actually did not go in space, but this is his backup suit. Here you go. This is the RX-5 suit that would have been used in the Apollo missions, but it was way too heavy and too bulky for the Apollo missions. Wasn't used. Definitely looks like something you'd see in a movie, though. These are definitely suits back in the day, like the 50s and 60s, that you would have seen in space movies. Alright, this is an Apollo style suit. This was Pete Conrad's suit for Apollo 12 when he made his spacewalk, also known as the EVA. Pete Conrad was very short. He almost didn't make it as an astronaut. In fact, he decided that since he was so short, that he had to have a big personality and had to be funny, and he joked and laughed a lot. So when there's during Christmas time, there's trees out like in this grove, which is the astronaut memorial area. His tree is actually lit up with red lights, so people know that it's his. Instead of the white lights like everybody else's, because he wanted to be seen. Alright, we are officially in line for the NASA tram tour. Our tour guide's name is Andy. Our driver's name is Josh. We're going to go to the Historic Mission Control. We're going to the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility, and we're going to Rocket Park. So we'll be headed back to Rocket Park. So we'll get to see the Saturn V, and we'll also go ahead and take a look at the outside rockets that we didn't get to see last time.
And I'll be your host today, and your driver's name is going to be Josh. He'll be your driver today. Before we begin, we need to go over a few safety precautions. Any children under the age of 3 need to be sat in the lap of an adult at all times, or if the child does not reach the ground fully, they need to be sat in the middle of the row between 2 adults. This is a no eating, no smoking tram, but drinks with secure lids are acceptable. Our tour is approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes long, with restroom breaks not readily available until our last stop, until Rocket Park, which is about 1 hour and 15 minutes into our tour. And ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while the tram is in motion. Josh, we are clear to go when you're ready.
Welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center, one of 10 NASA field centers, and the heart of human spaceflight operations for the past 50 years. It is here that history has been made and will continue on as the men and women of NASA push the boundaries of exploration.
All right, if you look over here, you're gonna see the building, the top floor is actually the astronaut offices. There's the Christopher Craft Mission Control Center. That's where we're headed.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
All right, here we are. Mission Control, historic Mission Control. That's Andy, our tour guide.
Welcome to Historic Mission Control, where Gemini, Mercury, Apollo, and Skylab all took place from. Before we head upstairs, I'd like you to know there's 87 steps, so if for any medical or physical reasons you are unable to climb 87 steps, please see my driver Josh, which just came through the door, and he'll assist you up the elevator. Once we get upstairs, it's going to be just like any other movie theater. Please pick any row that you would like. Just go down all the way to the left so that we can have everyone have a chance to have a seat. The last thing I would like to say is just to remind you that we need to keep our voices down to a minimum and our cell phones on silent so that we do not disturb the presentation today. With that being said, if you need help climbing those 87 steps, please see my driver Josh. Otherwise, please follow me for a workout.
Here we are, Historic Mission Control.
Welcome to the top. Got a beer? No, man. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Good.
Great. My name is Kyle. Can everybody hear me from the back?
Right.
All right, good. Well, again, if you did not catch that, my name is Kyle. I will be the host of your duration this time in this building. Now, everybody, welcome to the Historic Mission Control Center. So now, the room you see right in front of you, the room you're sitting in right now, is the actual Apollo and Historic Mission Control Center. This is the room where everything happened. All that magic happened for almost 30 years. Houston has been mission control in the center for all of NASA since 1965, since June of 1965 to be exact. The first mission ever controlled from Houston was Gemini 4 back in June 3rd of 1965. It was also a stepping stone because we actually realized we could step outside of our spacecraft and conduct spacewalks. Gemini was the planning phase for Apollo, which basically led to us landing on the surface of the moon. Now this picture over on the left side over here, you'll actually see, it's a picture of Ed White out in his first spacewalk on Gemini 4 of June 3rd of 1965. So now this room did actually open up back in 1965, controlling Gemini 4 and 40 other successful missions, which were 10 Apollo missions and 21 Space Shuttle missions, and also the other 9 Gemini missions. So now, from 1965 up until 1992, this room did actually operate as mission control. And as of now, if you did not know, mission control is still controlled from Houston, but it is one floor right below us, below our feet. And there are actually 2 active mission control rooms. Our white flight control room, which is not currently active 24/7, but the other one that is actually active 24/7, 365 days a year, is called our red flight control room. That's actually the International Space Station control room. Now, we can't visit them just because they are under mission operations constantly 24/7, 365 days a year. We do get the next best thing. Look on the right side over there, that screen over there, little tiny one you can barely see, that's a live feed from that room. And that's basically all we can get from there. So now the room you see right in front of you, the chairs you're sitting in right now, this building is a National Historic Landmark, meaning that everything in front of you is authentic back from the 1960s and 1970s. These are the actual consoles that they used to get men to the moon in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Now, of course, as the time came along, we did actually upgrade the equipment for the Space Shuttle program in the late 80s and the early 90s, and then eventually we basically had an agreement with the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and we got all our equipment back on loan, along with the Saturn V rocket. If you did not know that, it's on loan from the Air and Space Museum, and they gave it all back to us from their garage, basically. So all of it sits in here, and it is the actual equipment that they used. So now, these aren't computers like we have today, anything like that. What these are called are data monitors. So they receive data from something called a mainframe, which will be at the very basement of this building. And all the wiring, if you notice if you can see the floor at all, it's all tiling and it's all separated, and it's because each of the wires were all run through the floor, all the way to the basement of the building. And it would all run to the specific location that it needed to be on in that database. So now that mainframe was about the size of this room, took about 10 to 15 people to operate, and now it actually had a whopping memory space of about 2 megabytes. Open up any app on your phone, take about 5 pictures, and you'll have more processing power than we had to send 12 American men to walk on the surface of the moon. So now just a little bit more about the history of NASA. Of course, it did start operating back in 1958, and the first Mercury missions and the first Gemini missions were controlled from Florida. And after that, we did have a very, very valuable resource by the name of Lyndon B. Johnson, and he did establish mission control here in NASA, or here at Houston, sorry, for all of NASA in 1965. And if you did not know, this building has never closed once. It has been open since June of 1965 and all the way up until now for over 50 years straight, almost 51 years coming up in this June. So now, more about the room and why it's special. Each one over here on this right side, you see all these plaques over here. Each one is special because they're all designed by the crew of the astronauts who went on their mission on exactly what they were trying to accomplish and what was special to them about it. So none of these plaques are the same, and they all represent something else. So now the very bottom row, starting from the one all the way to the left, that square ones in the different shapes, those large ones on the bottom, that's for our Gemini era, from 1965 until 1966. Go ahead and direct your attention to the American flag on the left corner over there, but directly above it, see 2 rows of smaller plaques. The one on the very top is actually for our Apollo program, starting from Apollo 7 going all the way until Apollo 17. So now, of course, with a total of 6 successful moon landings, Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And in the bottom row, veering off to the right, were the first 21 space shuttle missions ever controlled out of NASA. And now back to the American flag really quick. I'm going to talk about what's special about this. Now, this flag has flown in space and made not 1 trip to the moon, but actually 2. Now, it did make its first trip on Apollo 11 as a backup flag just in case there's malfunction. And then on Apollo 17, it made an unscheduled flight. And basically, Eugene Cernan basically came into a mission control and he said, I'm taking this flag. And he brought it to the surface of the moon, he saluted it, took a picture with it, brought it back here as a memorial, generously, and brought it back. And he put it back up there. It's been up there since 1972. It has never been moved. And then you'll notice there's a tiny silver plaque. You can't read it, but it is very special. Now, this is a replica of an actual plaque that's still up on the surface of the moon, in the Sea of Tranquility, where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on July 20th, 1969. Now, what that plaque reads is, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. July 1969, became a peace for all mankind." And it's signed by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, and of course the president at the time, Richard Nixon. And that plaque still is up on the moon, and this is the replica that's left in mission control. So now, of course, this is the room that made everything possible. This is where all the magic happened for almost 30 years for all of NASA. This is the room that Neil Armstrong spoke to on the historical day of July 20th, 1969, when he and Buzz Aldrin made history about being the first people to ever land on the surface of the moon. And he said those words to the spacecraft communicator of a successful landing, sitting right in that seat right there, and he said, "Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed." And it was about 7 hours later, after working their lunar lander for a really long time, they got clearance from Houston from the spacecraft communicator saying, "Neil, Buzz, you're clear for your spacewalk." And as many of you know, Neil Armstrong was the first person to ever walk on the surface of the moon, and he set his left boot down, and he was speaking to the people that worked at NASA, over the 400,000 people that worked all across the United States at all of our 10 NASA field centers. And he was also speaking to the entire planet and what they were, all the support they gave him to make that mission possible. And he said those very, very famous words that most of you probably know. And he said, "That's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind." And this is the room that made that possible, and this is the room that he spoke to back in that day of July 20th, 1969. Does anybody have any really quick questions for me? Anything about NASA, this room, anything, past, current, future, does not matter what it is? No questions about NASA whatsoever? Come on, guys, I love getting questions. I pretty much know everything. All right, if you guys don't have any questions, I'll be standing right, or if you do come up with a question, I'll be standing right over here. Otherwise, I really thank you guys for joining us here today. As you stand to leave, please make sure to leave behind any personal items, your phone, your wallet, your kids. Please take them with you. And whenever you go ahead and follow your host, Andy, back downstairs to get you down to your tram. I don't think you have to sit exactly where you sat, but it just does kind of help us whenever you get back down there, just so you can get to your next stop, which is Building 9, our Space Vehicle Mock-up facility. All right, guys, you have a great day, and enjoy the rest of your tour.
As we make our way around the NASA grounds, you might notice a couple of white-tailed deers or a couple of other types of animals. That's because NASA is actually a reservation for a lot of other type of animals. Most of them are mostly deers. We actually have a couple of alligators here as well. So just don't be surprised if you see a couple of exotic animals around here. Speaking of something cool, onto your right, before we take this left here, you will see a building in front of you as you're turning. Building 32 has a whole bunch of vintage bikes from the early 60s and late 60s and early 70s, all donated back in the late 60s and early 70s. All these bikes are basically here for the NASA employees so that they can ride their bikes around the building, so rather than having to drive around with emissions.
Once again, if I could have everybody behind the black and yellow lines, please. We begin in just a moment as soon as everyone's inside.
All right, here we go. Space vehicle mock-up facility.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you on the very back, y'all can take as many photos as you like. Just keep moving forward so that we can have everybody come in behind you, please. But we're about to begin. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the astronaut training facility. What you are seeing here is one of the largest classrooms in use for our scientists, astronauts, and engineers of today. In addition to the activities you see here, they are working behind the scenes to keep the space program current and moving forward. NASA is planning and developing new hardware along with training procedures, which will then be used by astronauts in various International Space Station mock-ups, as you see down below. The International Space Station is a partnership of at least 15 nations from different international space agencies, which explains why there's different nationality flags on each portion of the International Space Station modules. As I said before, the 15 nations from the International Space Agencies include some of these. The United States is NASA, Russia's Roscosmos, European Space Agency, Japan's JAXA, and Canada's CSA. These nations all provide and operate the elements for the International Space Station. And if you look over here in front of the glass, where I'm pointing in front of the glass over here is a green egg-shaped spacecraft, and this is called the Russian Soyuz capsule. With the space shuttle now retired, this is our primary mode of transportation for sending 3 astronauts to and from the International Space Station. Unlike our previous capsule systems, the Soyuz does not land in water, but directly on hard land. The Soyuz lands with the help of parachutes and retro boosters. The main chutes load the Soyuz to a descent rate of about 16.5 miles an hour, or 26.5 kilometers per hour, which is still too fast for a comfortable landing. 1 second before touchdown, 2 sets of 3 small engines on the bottom of this vehicle fire, slowing the vehicle to soften its landing. Further cushioning the impact of landing are the crew seats themselves, which are made with custom-fitted liners, or basically a custom-fitted seat that hugs their body. This ensures a tight and snugly fit whenever the module lands back on Earth. But for those of y'all that are able to hear me within earshot, I'll be talking about the nose portion of the shuttle way over there, okay? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, as you make your way over to me, you should have seen a large nose portion of a shuttle known as the Crew Compartment Trainer, or the CCT. The CCT was used to help our astronauts train for space shuttle missions when they were funded, and it could rotate in both vertical and horizontal positions for launch and landing procedures. Since the shuttle is now retired, this mock-up will eventually be moved to a museum. This will make more room for new International Space Station modules, as you saw before, and more multi-purpose crew vehicles such as the Orion spacecraft. Speaking of which, if you look a little to the left of that nose portion of the shuttle, you will see 2 white mock-ups of our Orion space capsule. Orion is our next exploration vehicle that will carry up to 4 astronauts into deep space. It will provide emergency abort capabilities during the climb to orbit, sustain the crew during space travels, and provide safe re-entry from deep space velocity. This is pretty much the vehicle that's the jack of all trades of the space world. The European Space Agency, in partnership with NASA, is designing and developing the service module. Orion will serve as our exploration vehicle that will transport our astronauts one day to asteroids, the moons of Mars, and one day Mars itself.
Cool robot right there. Spider knot.
Gentlemen, as you make your way over to me, you should see a white pole directly in front of you. And it is a functional model of the onboard International Space Station arm, also known as the Robotics Motion Platform. It's designed to work in Earth's gravity, unlike the International Space Station arm, which deals with zero gravity and zero friction in space. This particular arm is special because it helped train the astronaut crew for the construction of the International Space Station before it was even built in space. And to the right of this, you will see our space exploration vehicles, or SEVs. If you've seen The Martian lately, you should know what those look like, except Hollywood makes them a little bit bigger than the way that we have them here. The surface exploration version of the SEV has a cabin mount on its chassis with wheels that can pivot 360 degrees and drive about 6 miles an hour or 10 kilometers per hour in any given direction. It also has the ability to have a 0-degree turning radius, so it can pretty much do donuts anywhere. It's about the size of an average pickup truck, but with 12 wheels, and can house 2 astronauts for up to 14 days with sleeping and sanitary facilities inside. We know this because our astronauts stay in those little tiny vehicles for 2 weeks at a time. NASA has developed a new spacesuit for both the surface and space versions of the SEV. Astronauts can work in shirt sleeves and in the safety of the vehicle's cabin, and when they need to or want to go out for an exploration mission, they can quickly enter and exit their spacesuit through suit ports. These protected airlock suit ports keep the astronaut suits on the outside of the vehicle, allowing the spacewalk to start within 10 minutes, compared to what it can take to put a spacesuit on the International Space Station, which can take approximately 2 hours to put on. Created to help our astronauts maintain and repair parts aboard the International Space Station, Robonaut has 2 hands, each with 5 fingers. Its fingers are so accurate that it can turn a single page of a book without ripping it, and can utilize standardized tools designed for humans, such as a powered screwdriver. And off the record, it can actually send a text message without hitting autocorrect. NASA has built and sent a pair of high-tech legs up to the International Space Station for Robonaut 2. He's over here where I'm speaking, next to the glass, and with the blue gurney over here. He's the one hanging with the, well, he's throwing up a kung fu sign or something like that.
From the moon, Mars, asteroids, and comets. The world's largest collection of moon. On the left, you see a circle of trees set back from the road. This modest stand of oaks is the Astronaut Memorial Grove, established for the 10th anniversary of the January 28, 1986 loss of the Space Shuttle Challenger and its crew. Another group of 7 oaks was added after the deaths of the crew of Space Shuttle Columbia on February 1st, 2003. We'll pause here for a moment. 3 days after the loss of Columbia, President George W. Bush came to JSC and spoke these words.
To leave behind Earth and air and gravity is an ancient dream of humanity. For these 7, it was a dream fulfilled. Each of these astronauts had the daring and discipline required of their calling. Each of them knew that great endeavors are inseparable from great risks, and each of them accepted those risks willingly, even joyfully, in the cause of discovery. America's space program will go on.
I don't know what's way out there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Little Joe 2. And here is the Mercury Redstone.
Welcome to the Saturn V rocket, everyone. This particular rocket is very, very special because it is a live rocket. It is real. This was meant to be Apollo 18. However, our funding got cut for it in 1972 so that we could fund the Vietnam War. So that's why we have it. When we launch one of these into space, we actually lose the entire rocket except for the command module at the very front. You'll see it whenever we're about to leave, but it is all the way up at the very tip of this rocket. As you came into the door, you probably got blown away, literally, by the rocket size and the F-1 rockets behind it. The thing that makes this rocket, another thing that makes this rocket special is that it was created with the help of a German Nazi scientist named Werner von Braun. And this guy, after World War II, was conscripted into the United States Army as well with his rocket scientist, and they brought him over here for asylum. So he rather chose to live and give us his rocket secrets than die in the hands of Polish. Each one of these rockets produces 1.5 million pounds of thrust. The rocket as it without any fuel inside of it is 400,000 pounds. Whenever it's full of fuel, it's 6.5 million pounds. So whenever all of these rockets are firing off at the same time, it's 7.5 million pounds of thrust to get a 6.5 million pound rocket off the ground. The bulk of the fuel is in this very first stage right here, which when it's full by itself, it is an amazing 5 million pounds alone. The rest of the other stages, the second stage is only 1 million pounds, and the final and third stage is only literally 75,000 pounds. There are 3 types of fuel to make rocket fuel for this particular rocket. The first one and most important was obviously the oxidizer, which was 100% liquid oxygen, and that was just the way to give the oxygen or the oxygen in space so that we could keep a lit flame. Second portion was hydrogen, and the final was a special formulated kerosene called RP1. And our NASA scientists right around the street produced it. It basically has a it has the ability to be sustainable in low and high, very high temperatures, and also it has the molecules are 7 molecules of oxygen, 1 molecule of hydrogen, and 1 molecule of kerosene. The mixture of that together is the perfect ratio to get a perfect amount of thrust. Any more hydrogen or any more oxygen than that, it would explode. Any less, then it would not have enough power to lift this rocket. That's pretty much it for the first stage. Follow me to our second area. If you want, there's also a readable plaque on the other side if you don't want to listen to me talk. Come on. All right. So now that some of y'all are over here, we'll start in the second area. You might notice that there's an empty portion right here. And what was going to be here was actually just a simple ring. And if you've ever seen one of these launching from space on TV, you should have seen one of those rings just falling backwards from space, falling back to the Earth. That's exactly what that was. It wasn't just a simple ring though. It was made by IBM Computer Manufacturer Group. So this portion of the rocket this portion of the IBM computer mainframe was actually for telemetry. It would let the rudders at the back of the rocket know which way to angle, so it would get the perfect trajectory to get out of our atmosphere, as well as the rocket angle as well to get the most amount of thrust. At top speed, this rocket would most likely get around 25,000 miles an hour, which is what Apollo 15 topped out at, so we're topping it out at there. So 25,000 miles an hour was about the speed that this thing would be going. The first section burns for about 360 seconds before falling back into the Atlantic Ocean, never to be recovered, unless you're the owner of Amazon. He actually got a piece of the hull and brought it back to his very nice condo, I'm assuming, wherever he lives. And none have ever been recovered other than that one. They basically are a reefer fish at this point, so you would have to live with the responsibility of killing an ecosystem of fish. The second area is going to be burning for about approximately 260 seconds, and this is just enough fuel to get them out of our atmosphere. Once that has been accomplished, they let it go and it falls back through the atmosphere where it burns up. We do not get the second stage back. Not even dust comes back. As I said before, it's only 1 million pounds, 4 million pounds less than the one back there. But keep on moving forward. We're going to start picking up a little bit of momentum here. This third and final section was a special part of the rocket because it was able to start twice in space. First section, I believe it was about 160 seconds. Then they would cut it off to leave our Earth's gravitational pull, and then they would do another burn a couple of minutes later, and it would get them into the right trajectory of the moon, so that they would actually get the perfect angle to land onto that moon. They're basically aiming at a place in dark space where the moon will be whenever they get there. So they're basically going into some darkness, and they're hoping that they got the math right. After the second burn, it burned for about 260 seconds, and after that it becomes space junk once they elapse all of that. So it floats in space forever, never to be recovered. So they either land on the moon, or they come back to Earth and burn up in the atmosphere, whichever comes first. And follow me down this way, we'll see our command modules. Would stay inside of, they would be inside of that little capsule for about a good couple of few hours. They would be on their backs would be facing the rocket, facing straight forward, hoping that IBM knew what they were doing. I'm sorry, but in the middle area right there was another ring that I was telling you about, and inside of there was actually the systems, which would tell you how much fuel you had, their life support, all the main functions. That would also burn up in the atmosphere after re-entry. And behind me, this empty area right here, that would have been the IBM supercomputer, which is basically to control everything down there. Inside here, as you walk up in here, you will see an empty empty area. And this is where we would house our rovers, our lunar landers, everything, every scientific equipment would have been stuffed into this little area right here. After you leave this portion right here, this part that I'm luckily touching, this part would fall off into space, never to be recovered, and you would only be left with the portion that's gray and white. You can't see it just yet, but the beginning of it is that little rocket part right there. This section right here would float into space, and the part with the rocket would rotate, and it would basically dock in space with the command module. That was launching on the moon and launching and landing on the moon.
Didn't you say this part had all the rover and stuff in it?
Rover, everything was inside.
So how does this? Why does it disappear into space?
Because we leave it on the moon. We don't bring it back.
So it's not just floating around in space. You land
This
this part
portion
on.
right here.
You land this part on the moon.
No, ma'am. The lunar lander itself, this portion right here,
Yeah.
which is encasing it, gets let go before the lunar lander land. Like the lunar lander comes out, it lands, is doing its thing, and this just becomes, it just lets go, and they just float away. And so whenever they're ready to come back, the lunar lander, if you've seen it on TV, it shoots back up with advanced trigonometry and calculus. They would know where the front capsule would be whenever they launched back up. So they would dock back perfectly. And with this being gone, they would do one last burn to leave the moon's gravitational pull with that rocket back there, and the Earth's gravitational pull would pull them back to Earth. And that was pretty much it. That's it. That's pretty much the rocket in a nutshell, everyone. But unfortunately, that does wrap it up for about 15 minutes. I wish I had more time for y'all, but we do need to get back to the museum. But if you have any questions, I'll be happy to assist anything you have any questions for.
All right, so we've taken the NASA tram tour. I hope you liked it. I hope you liked seeing NASA again. We will come back to Independence Plaza probably next week sometime and just check that out as like a separate little area. We won't come back into here and do all this stuff unless you guys want me to. It was a lot of fun. Andy's a good host, so if you ever come to Houston, please come to Space Center Houston. Check out Andy as a host. He's really good. All right, that was Space Center Houston's NASA tram tour. We've seen NASA today as well. Now we're gonna go head out of here. I'm gonna go home, watch a little TV, eat a little dinner, and as Tom Hanks would say in Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay, so I just found out that at Rocket Park right now is the Astros Caravan, and it's Lance McCullers and Luis Valbuena. So we're gonna go and see them. Yes, we just left Space Center Houston. I've already said goodbye for the day, but we're gonna go see them. Go Astros!